The evening sun cast long shadows through the towering windows of the Grand Palmer Hotel, making the polished marble floors glow like honey. Behind the elegant front desk stood Mr. Lee, a man whose journey to becoming general manager was paved with determination and excellence. His crisp navy suit and warm smile had become familiar sights to both guests and staff over his 10 years of running one of Boston's most prestigious hotels. Tonight was especially busy, with the hotel preparing to host hundreds of medical professionals for an international conference. The lobby hummed with activity as staff members adjusted flower arrangements and polished brass fixtures. Mr. Lee watched with quiet pride as his team worked seamlessly together, just as he trained them to do. The grand chandeliers overhead sparkled like diamonds, their light reflecting off the antique mirrors that lined the walls. Every corner of the lobby spoke of luxury and tradition, from the hand-carved wooden panels to the plush oriental rugs that cushioned guests' footsteps. Mr. Lee had personally overseen the hotel's recent renovation, blending classic elegance with modern comfort. He paused from reviewing the evening's guest list to straighten a slightly crooked name tag on his lapel. A small detail, but details mattered in the luxury hotel business. His 2 decades of experience, starting as a bellhop and working his way up through every position, had taught him that excellence lived in these tiny moments of attention. The sound of rolling luggage and quiet conversations filled the air as early arrivals for the medical conference began checking in. Mr. Lee noticed several familiar faces among them, respected doctors and researchers who had stayed at the Grand Palmer during previous events. He enjoyed these moments of recognition, the small nods and warm greetings that came with building relationships with returning guests over the years. As he guided his front desk team through the check-in rush, he couldn't help but reflect on his journey. From earning his MBA through night classes while working full-time, to learning every aspect of hotel operations from the ground up, to finally earning this position through sheer hard work and dedication. The Grand Palmer wasn't just a hotel to him. It was a testament to the power of perseverance. The lobby's atmosphere shifted subtly as the automatic doors swished open again. A woman in designer clothes entered, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. She carried herself with an air of someone used to getting her way, her expression already set in disapproval before she even reached the front desk. Mr. Lee had encountered every type of guest in his career, but something in her approach made him straighten his spine just a little more. Little did he know, this ordinary evening at the Grand Palmer was about to become anything but ordinary. As the woman made her way to his desk, the warmth of the setting sun seemed to fade, and the friendly chatter in the lobby grew quieter. The next few minutes would test everything Mr. Lee had learned about professionalism, dignity, and the true meaning of leadership in ways he never expected. The woman approached the front desk like a storm cloud moving across a summer sky. Her designer handbag swung from her arm as she pushed past an elderly couple, ignoring their startled expressions. The click of her heels against the marble floor sounded like tiny hammers, demanding attention from everyone in the lobby. "I need to speak to whoever's in charge of this establishment," she announced, her voice carrying across the previously peaceful space. Her eyes swept past Mr. Lee as if he were part of the furniture, focusing instead on the young desk clerk beside him. Immediately, Mr. Lee stepped forward with his usual professional smile. "Good evening, ma'am. I'm the general manager. How may I assist you today?" The woman's perfectly manicured eyebrows shot up, and she let out a laugh that held no humor. No," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "I mean the real manager, the person actually in charge of this hotel." A few nearby guests paused their conversations, attention drawn by her rising voice. Mr. Lee maintained his composed demeanor, though he felt the weight of every eye in the lobby. "Ma'am, I can assure you that I am indeed the general manager of the Grand Palmer Hotel. I've held this position for the past decade." Her face flushed red, clashing with her expensive silk scarf. "That's impossible," she declared, pulling out her phone. "I've stayed at luxury hotels all over the world." I know what a proper hotel manager looks like. I'm going to call corporate right now." The young desk clerk beside Mr. Lee shifted uncomfortably, but years of experience had taught him how to handle such situations. He could see his staff tensing up, ready to intervene, but he subtly raised his hand, their signal to let him handle things. "I understand you may have concerns," Mr. Lee replied calmly, his voice steady and professional. "While you're certainly welcome to contact our corporate office, I want to assure you that I'm fully qualified to address any issues you might have. I've personally overseen the management of this property through multiple renovations and countless high-profile events." The woman's phone shook in her hand as she scrolled through her contacts. "This is ridiculous. Do you know how much I'm paying to stay here? I demand to speak to someone more appropriate for this position. Someone who understands the caliber of this establishment." A small crowd had gathered now, some guests pretending to check their phones while others watched openly. The elderly couple from earlier whispered to each other, shaking their heads in disapproval, not at Mr. Lee, but at the woman's behavior. The tension in the lobby grew thick enough to cut with a knife. Several regular guests who knew Mr. Lee personally stood nearby, their faces showing a mixture of shock and indignation on his behalf. But Mr. Lee's expression never wavered from its professional calm, even as the woman's implications hung heavy in the air. He reached slowly into his jacket pocket, his movements deliberate and controlled. The woman took a step back, her phone still clutched in her manicured hands, as if expecting him to produce something threatening. Instead, he pulled out a simple business card holder, its leather surface worn smooth from years of use. What happened next would become a moment that every staff member who witnessed it would remember for years to come. It wasn't just about handling a difficult guest. It was about maintaining dignity in the face of prejudice, about showing true leadership when it mattered most. The woman's voice grew louder with each passing moment, bouncing off the marble walls of the lobby like an unwelcome echo. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows about this," she declared, jabbing her finger at her phone screen as she tried to dial. Her hands were shaking so much that she had to keep retyping the number. Several guests had their phones out now, quietly recording the scene. A young couple near the coffee bar whispered to each other, their faces a mixture of concern and disbelief. The wife seemed to be texting rapidly, probably sharing the unfolding drama on social media. "I've already contacted my travel agent," the woman continued, her designer bag swinging wildly as she gestured. "She books rooms here all the time. When she hears about this, she'll never send another client to this hotel. Never." Mr. Lee remained perfectly still behind the desk, his posture straight but not stiff, his hands clasped loosely in front of him. A lesser manager might have called security by now, but his years of experience had taught him that sometimes the best response was simply to let someone reveal their true character to the world. The front desk staff exchanged worried glances. They had seen difficult guests before, but this was different. One of the newer bellhops took a step forward, ready to intervene, but Mr. Lee caught his eye and gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. This small gesture spoke volumes about his leadership style: calm, controlled, and always thinking 3 steps ahead. "You know what?" The woman's voice had taken on a shrill edge now. "I want a full refund. Every single penny. And I want it right now. I refuse to stay at a hotel that would put someone like, well," she gestured vaguely at Mr. Lee, leaving her prejudice hanging in the air like a bad smell. The lobby had grown so quiet you could hear the soft hum of the air conditioning. A distinguished-looking man in a conference badge stood up from one of the leather armchairs, his face darkening with disapproval. Several other guests moved closer to the front desk, forming an unplanned but united front of support. The woman seemed to feed off the attention, her voice rising even higher. "This is supposed to be a luxury hotel. I'm a platinum member at every major hotel chain. I spend more on hotels each month than most people make in a year. Do you have any idea who I am?" Behind her, the elderly couple who had been checking in earlier had abandoned their luggage cart to watch the scene unfold. The old gentleman wrapped an arm around his wife's shoulders as she shook her head sadly, witnessing behavior that belonged in a bygone era they'd hoped was long past. Mr. Lee hadn't moved, hadn't raised his voice, hadn't shown any sign of the impact her words might be having. His calm seemed to infuriate the woman even more. She fumbled in her bag, pulling out a stack of membership cards from various hotel chains, spreading them on the counter like evidence in a trial. "Look at these. This is who I am. This is the level of service I deserve." She slapped her hand on the marble counter, making several nearby guests jump. "I demand to speak to someone in authority right now." The tension in the lobby had reached a breaking point. Everyone waited to see what would happen next, wondering how this soft-spoken manager would handle such a blatant display of prejudice. Little did they know, they were about to witness a masterclass in grace under pressure, a moment that would soon be shared thousands of times across social media platforms as an example of how to handle discrimination with dignity. The moment had come. Mr. Lee reached into his jacket pocket with deliberate slowness, his movements smooth and precise. The woman took half a step back, still clutching her spread of membership cards on the counter. The lobby held its collective breath, waiting to see what would happen next. He pulled out a small leather card holder, its surface worn smooth from years of use. From it, he drew out 3 items: his business card, a folded newspaper clipping, and a photograph. He laid them on the counter, carefully arranging them in a row, each placement purposeful and unhurried. "Ma'am," he began, his voice carrying clearly across the silent lobby without being raised, "I'd like to share something with you." He gestured to his business card first. The elegant cardstock displayed his name and title in raised letters, along with the hotel's golden logo. "This is my business card, showing my position as general manager of the Grand Palmer Hotel." His finger moved to the newspaper clipping. "This is an article from the Boston Business Journal, featuring our hotel's recent renovation project, which I personally oversaw. And this," he touched the photograph, "is from last month's Hotel Association Gala, where I was honored as Hotelier of the Year." The woman's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Her eyes darted between the items on the counter and Mr. Lee's calm face. Some of the guests who had been filming lowered their phones, drawn into the quiet power of the moment. "I've spent 20 years in the hospitality industry," he continued, his tone remaining professional and courteous. "I started as a bellhop, worked my way through night school to earn my MBA, and learned every aspect of hotel operations from the ground up. I've trained staff at 12 different luxury hotels across the country." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. The lobby remained silent except for the soft classical music playing through hidden speakers. Even the young children present seemed to understand the importance of this moment. Now, Mr. Lee straightened his already perfect tie. "I have 2 options to offer you. First, I can personally ensure that your stay with us meets the high standards you expect from a luxury hotel. I'll assign our best suite attendant to your room and make dinner reservations at our Michelin-starred restaurant myself." He folded his hands in front of him, the picture of professional composure. "Or, if you prefer, I can help you find accommodation at another hotel. I maintain excellent relationships with all the other luxury properties in the city, and I'm sure they would be happy to have you as their guest." The distinguished-looking man who had stood up earlier now stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Mr. Lee," he said warmly, "I don't know if you remember me, but you helped arrange accommodation for our entire medical conference last year. Your attention to detail was extraordinary." Other guests began nodding in agreement. A woman in a business suit spoke up from near the coffee bar. "He arranged my daughter's wedding here last summer. It was absolutely perfect." The lobby had transformed. What had started as a scene of confrontation had become a moment of quiet triumph. The woman's face had turned from red to pale, her earlier confidence deflating like a punctured balloon. Her membership cards lay forgotten on the counter, their supposed importance diminished by the real achievements displayed beside them. Mr. Lee's response had done more than defend his position. It had demonstrated the true meaning of luxury service: dignity, professionalism, and grace under pressure. The phones that had been recording captured something more powerful than a confrontation. They captured a masterclass in handling prejudice with unwavering professionalism. The silence in the lobby was different now. What had started as uncomfortable tension had transformed into something more powerful, a shared moment of respect and understanding. The woman's hands trembled as she tried to gather her membership cards from the counter, dropping several in the process. More guests stepped forward, each with their own story to share. A tall gentleman in a conference badge approached the desk, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to speaking at medical conventions. "Mr. Lee," he said warmly, "I've been bringing my medical conferences here for 5 years now. I remember when you helped us rearrange the entire ballroom at midnight to accommodate our last-minute equipment needs." An older couple who had been quietly watching the scene unfolded came forward next. "He remembered our anniversary last month," the wife said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Had champagne sent to our room without us even mentioning it. That's what real luxury service looks like." The woman's face had lost all its previous arrogance, replaced by a look of growing embarrassment. Her phone, which she had been so eager to use for complaints earlier, now lay forgotten in her designer bag. Several of the guests who had been recording the incident lowered their phones, caught up in the spontaneous outpouring of support. A young front desk clerk who had been watching nervously stepped forward with quiet confidence. "Mr. Lee trained all of us personally," she said. "He knows every detail of running this hotel, from the kitchen to housekeeping. He could probably do any job here blindfolded." The lobby had become a stage for an impromptu testimony to true leadership. A businessman near the coffee bar spoke up about how Mr. Lee had once helped him print and bind an entire presentation at 3 a.m. before a crucial meeting. A bride-to-be mentioned how he personally walked her through every detail of her upcoming wedding plans. Each story added another crack to the woman's previously unshakable sense of superiority. Her designer clothes and platinum memberships seemed less impressive now, overshadowed by real examples of exceptional service and leadership. Mr. Lee maintained his professional demeanor throughout, neither gloating nor showing any sign of satisfaction at this turn of events. If anything, he appeared slightly uncomfortable with the praise, gently trying to direct attention back to his team's efforts rather than his own achievements. The distinguished doctor who had first spoken stepped closer to the desk. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I've stayed at luxury hotels all over the world. Paris, Tokyo, Dubai. But the level of service Mr. Lee provides here is truly exceptional. It's not about fancy titles or membership cards. It's about genuine care for guests and attention to detail." The woman's earlier demands for a refund and corporate contacts seemed almost comical now. She stood frozen, her perfectly manicured nails fidgeting with her scarf, as the reality of her behavior sank in. The phones that had recorded her tirade had captured something far more powerful than just another viral moment of bad behavior. They had documented a community coming together to stand against prejudice. The classical music that usually faded into the background of the lobby now seemed to swell, underlining this pivotal moment. The chandelier light caught the gold lettering on Mr. Lee's business card, still lying on the counter next to his professional accolades. Silent testament to a career built on excellence rather than entitlement. Mr. Lee looked at the woman with the same professional courtesy he'd shown since the beginning, his voice gentle but firm. "Ma'am, I need to know your preference. Would you like to continue your stay with us, or would you prefer assistance finding other accommodations?" The woman's earlier bravado had completely evaporated. Her designer scarf, which she'd been adjusting nervously, hung limply around her neck. The lobby waited for her response, the afternoon sun casting long shadows through the tall windows. She started, then stopped, her voice barely above a whisper. She glanced around at the faces watching her, not with anger, but with quiet disappointment. The elderly couple who had witnessed everything shook their heads sadly, while the medical conference attendees whispered among themselves. A young bellhop approached with a cart of luggage belonging to new arrivals, the wheels squeaking slightly on the marble floor. The normal routine of the hotel continued around them, a reminder that life moved forward, regardless of individual moments of drama. The woman cleared her throat and tried again. I suppose. She looked down at her expensive shoes, then back at Mr. Lee. I suppose I'll stay. The words seemed to cost her something, like admitting defeat in a battle she never should have started. Mr. Lee nodded professionally, as if this had been a perfectly normal check-in conversation. Very well, he said, reaching for a set of room keys. You're in our deluxe suite on the 15th floor. Our concierge will be happy to make dinner reservations for you at any of the fine restaurants in the area. He gestured to a young staff member. Please escort our guest to her room. The staff member stepped forward immediately, professional training overcoming any personal feelings about what they just witnessed. The woman gathered her belongings slowly, avoiding eye contact with anyone in the lobby. Her designer bag, which she'd wielded like a weapon earlier, now hung heavily from her arm. As she turned to follow the staff member to the elevators, she paused. She turned back to Mr. Lee, her voice so quiet that only those nearest could hear. I apologize for my behavior. The words came out stiffly, but they were genuine. Sometimes, shame could be a powerful teacher. Mr. Lee acknowledged her apology with a slight bow of his head. Thank you, ma'am. I hope you'll enjoy your stay with us. His response was a masterclass in professional grace, accepting the apology without dwelling on the offense. As the elevator doors closed behind her, the lobby seemed to collectively exhale. The other guests began dispersing, returning to their own activities, though many stopped to shake Mr. Lee's hand or pat him on the shoulder as they passed. The young front desk clerk who had watched everything turned to Mr. Lee with admiration. Sir, how do you do it? Stay so calm when someone treats you that way. Mr. Lee straightened a guest information pamphlet on the counter before responding. In this business, he said thoughtfully, we have a choice every time we face difficulty. We can either let it lower us to someone else's level, or we can use it as a chance to demonstrate our true professionalism. The afternoon sun continued its journey across the lobby, the crystal chandelier casting rainbow patterns on the walls. Outside, the city bustled on, unaware of the small drama that had just played out in this elegant space. But for those who had witnessed it, something had changed. They had seen firsthand how dignity and professionalism could overcome prejudice and ignorance. 3 months after the incident, the Grand Palmer Hotel's training room was packed with staff members from all departments. The video of what happened that day had spread across social media, touching millions of people worldwide. But here, in this room, it wasn't about viral fame. It was about learning. Mr. Lee stood at the front of the room, his usual calm presence drawing everyone's attention. What happened that day wasn't just about me, he explained, adjusting his perfectly knotted tie. It was about how we handle difficult situations in the hospitality industry. The room was filled with both veteran staff and new hires, all watching intently. A few of those who had been present that day nodded, remembering the tension in the lobby, the shocked faces, and most importantly, the peaceful resolution. Someone sent me this yesterday, Mr. Lee said, holding up his phone. A guest from Dubai wrote that his daughter watched the video and decided to study hotel management. She said she wanted to learn how to handle tough situations with grace. The young bellhop who had witnessed everything raised his hand. Sir, I've been meaning to ask, weren't you angry? How did you stay so calm? Mr. Lee smiled gently, looking around the room at his team. Of course I felt emotions, he admitted. We all do. But our job isn't about our feelings. It's about providing the best possible service to every guest, even those who challenge us. He walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. You know, I received a call from our corporate office last week. They're implementing new training programs across all their hotels, using what happened here as a case study in professional excellence. The head of housekeeping, who had worked at the hotel for 15 years, spoke up. The other day, a guest was really rude to one of my staff members about a missing towel. I remembered how you handled things, and we turned the situation around completely. The guest even apologized later. Mr. Lee nodded approvingly. That's exactly it. Every difficult moment is an opportunity to show who we really are. We're not just providing a service, we're setting an example. A maintenance worker raised his hand. My kids saw the video at school, he said proudly. Their teacher used it in a lesson about respect and dignity. They were so excited to tell everyone their dad works here. The room buzzed with similar stories, how the incident had affected them, changed their approach to difficult situations, inspired them to be better at their jobs. The video had done more than go viral. It had started conversations about respect, professionalism, and handling prejudice with dignity. Next week, Mr. Lee announced, straightening some papers on the podium, I'll be speaking at the International Hotel Management Conference about this experience. But what I'm most proud of isn't how I handled things. It's how this team came together. He gestured to the wall where the hotel's mission statement hung in elegant lettering. We're not just running a hotel. We're showing the world what true hospitality means, treating everyone with respect and dignity, no matter how they treat us. As the training session wrapped up, staff members lingered to chat, sharing their own experiences and lessons learned. The incident had become more than just a viral moment. It had transformed into a teaching tool, a source of pride, and a reminder of the power of maintaining professionalism in the face of prejudice. Outside, the sun set over the city, casting a warm glow through the training room windows. The Grand Palmer Hotel continued its daily operations, welcoming new guests, hosting events, and setting an example of excellence in hospitality. And somewhere in the world, people were still sharing the video, spreading its message of dignity, respect, and the quiet power of responding to hatred with unwavering professionalism.